I probably shouldn't have stepped into the kitchen that morning. But something about the silence in the house. It was heavy, too still, like a breath being held, you know? I told myself it was just another Tuesday, just another morning. But deep down, I think I already knew it wasn't. He was there, sitting at the kitchen island with his foot propped up on a stool, nursing a half-eaten toast and scrolling through something on his phone. The sleeve of his hoodie was pushed up to the elbow, and for some ridiculous reason, I noticed the veins in his forearm. That stupid detail. Why did I notice that? Morning, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. He looked up and smiled. Not the polite kind, but the kind that lingers for a second too long. Hey, thanks for the breakfast. I hadn't made him anything yet, but there was coffee already brewing, and for some reason, I just poured 2 cups. Muscle memory, maybe? Or maybe I just wanted to sit across from someone who actually looked at me when I spoke. As I slid the cup across the counter, our fingers touched. Barely. Just for a second. But that second stretched out like slow motion, and I swear to you, neither of us moved right away. My eyes met his, and something in his expression shifted. Almost like he saw me. Not just looked at me, but actually saw me. I pulled back too fast, muttering something about hot surfaces and old habits. He just nodded, quiet, and went back to his phone. But I knew he felt it too. That weird static in the air. It wasn't just me. It couldn't have been. A few minutes later, I excused myself and went upstairs. I told myself it was to start laundry, but really, I needed space. Breathing room. A moment to press my hand against my chest and calm the ridiculous thudding in there. What the hell was that? This wasn't some silly crush. I mean, I'm almost twice his age, for God's sake. I'm married. Married to a man who still kisses me on the cheek out of habit, who still compliments my cooking, who still sleeps beside me but hasn't really looked at me in years. Just last night, he kissed me before bed. Same kiss he gives when he hands me the car keys or when the delivery guy brings groceries. Functional, dry, emotionless. I smiled, like always, then turned off the light and lay there staring at the ceiling while the fan clicked above us like a broken metronome. I remember thinking, what if this is it? What if this is all there is left? Quiet dinners, separate screens, polite kisses. A house filled with routines and noise, but absolutely no spark. And now, here I was, hiding in the laundry room, touching my lips like they still held the echo of someone else's gaze. Which, I know, sounds insane. But if you've ever felt invisible for long enough, even a moment of being noticed can hit you like thunder. I went downstairs later, all composed, hair tucked neatly behind one ear, pretending none of it happened. But when I walked past the living room, he looked up from the couch. Our eyes locked for half a second, and he smiled again, soft and slow, like he was holding on to something we hadn't even said yet. You ever feel like your whole life just shifted by a single glance? I didn't answer him, didn't speak, just kept walking, the ceramic mug still warm in my hands and my heart still racing under my robe. No words, just silence. But that silence, it wasn't empty. Not anymore. The next morning, I made his eggs the way he liked them. Over medium, yolks just a little runny. I even toasted the bread to that precise shade he'd mentioned once without thinking. Stupid, right? That I remembered? I draped a soft throw blanket over the back of the couch where he usually sat, the kind with those fuzzy tassels that stick to your clothes. Bought it last week, but hadn't even unwrapped it till today. No idea why it suddenly felt urgent. He limped into the room with a slight wince, balancing his weight on one good leg. I was fluffing the new pillow I'd left for him when I heard him say, "Wow, this place feels different." Oh? I turned casual, pretending I hadn't been hovering. More comfortable, I hope. He chuckled, then nodded. Yeah? Warmer. His eyes lingered on me for just a beat longer than necessary. Not in a teenage, hormonal way, more like he was noticing something. Or trying not to. I handed him his plate and our fingers brushed again. Second time now. He didn't pull away, just smiled with a slight tilt of his head, like he was about to say something and thought better of it. Later, we sat on the floor by the fireplace. Don't ask why. It just happened. He was flipping through old photos on his phone, showing me pictures from some college camping trip. His hair was longer, face more boyish, but the eyes were the same. Clear, searching. I pointed at one where he was knee-deep in a river, soaked and grinning like a fool. "You look 12. He laughed. I was 19. "Still a baby," I said, then instantly regretted it. My tone was too soft. Too fond? He turned the screen toward me again. "You know, I saw this photo the other day and thought, you kind of look like you used to, back then." I raised a brow. "Kind of? You were beautiful then," he said, voice low. "Still are." My smile froze and I felt heat rise up the back of my neck. I opened my mouth to respond with some deflection, but nothing came. Instead, I looked at the photo again, just to have somewhere else to put my eyes. I should have said thank you. Should have laughed it off, but I didn't. I just sat there, blinking. And then he leaned in. It wasn't a kiss, not really. More like a soft brush of his lips against my cheek. But he paused there, just for a moment, and I felt the warmth of him like a pulse against my skin. My breath caught, and I didn't move. I should have. God knows I should have. But I didn't. He pulled back, clearing his throat as if realizing the line he'd just towed. "Sorry, I meant to say thank you." I nodded slowly, my voice refusing to work. My fingers curled into my lap, nails pressing into my palm just to feel something solid. My brain screamed boundaries, but my body, it didn't flinch. That's the worst part. Later, folding laundry, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Just a weird moment. Hormones, gratitude, confusion. Mine or his. I even went so far as to rehearse a little speech I'd give just in case he brought it up. You know, let's not make things awkward. We're adults, that kind of thing. But he never brought it up. And honestly, that made it worse. Because silence has weight. And his silence carried intention. So why didn't I shut it down? Why didn't I tell him it was inappropriate, out of line, unacceptable? Maybe because it didn't feel like any of those things. Not in that moment. And that's what scared me most. He came in from the laundry room holding something pale and slinky in one hand, his face half curious, half amused. "Found this in the wash," he said, holding it up. "Didn't look like one of mine." I froze. It was my silk robe, the ivory one with the lace trim I usually wear only when I'm alone. I hadn't even realized it was missing from the hamper, but there it was, dangling from his fingers like a secret pulled into daylight. "It must have gotten mixed in," I said quickly, reaching out for it. But he didn't hand it over right away. He looked at the fabric, then at me. "Smells like you." The room stopped spinning for a moment. My stomach tightened. I noticed," he added, suddenly more serious. "That scent, it's kind of familiar." My heart kicked against my chest so hard I swear I felt it in my throat. I laughed. Awkward. Forced. "It's just laundry detergent," I said, snatching it back and folding it fast, as if making it disappear would erase the moment. Later that afternoon, while cleaning up in his room, he had left his laptop open, some socks under the bed, the usual. I noticed a book on his nightstand. Hardcover, worn edges. Something about it pulled me in. It was a collection of essays I had given his father years ago. I flipped it open. On the third page was a sticky note. My handwriting. A quote I'd underlined once, scrawled next to it. "You are allowed to want more." I had written that. I remembered the ink, the pen, the moment. But the note wasn't in his father's copy. It was in his. He'd kept it. That night after dinner, the house felt like it was holding its breath again. My husband had gone upstairs early, something about an early meeting. The hallway light was dimmed. I was clearing the plates, and he passed behind me with a quiet, "Thanks again." Then, without warning, at the foot of the stairs, he stopped, turned, and before I could process anything, he leaned in and kissed me. It was fast. Just a moment. No ceremony. But it held weight. Heat. That kind of kiss where you taste a decision being made. And I didn't stop it. That's what's been echoing in my head on loop. I didn't stop it. I stood there, dazed, fingers still wrapped around a dish towel while he disappeared up the steps like nothing had happened. Like we hadn't just crossed a line so sharp it might have left a scar. Why didn't I say something? Why did I just stand there? And don't tell me it's because I was confused. That would be too easy. Hours later, I crept into the bedroom quietly, guilt already forming like smoke in my chest. My husband was asleep, on his side, breathing heavy. I slid into bed, stared at the ceiling again, and that's when I noticed something strange. The closet door was open, wider than usual. I got up, walked over barefoot, and there, on the floor, were two pairs of my heels. One from the bedroom, the other from his office, side by side, on the carpet, like someone had placed them there, deliberately. That night, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. New lingerie, pale blue with delicate stitching I picked out weeks ago but never wore. Too pretty to waste on a regular Wednesday, I'd told myself. Too ridiculous, maybe. But something in me needed to feel something again, or at least pretend I still could. I adjusted the straps, smoothed the fabric, and walked into the bedroom like a woman stepping onto a stage she didn't ask to be on. He was already in bed, reading emails on his tablet. When he saw me, he blinked. Surprised, but not speechless. "You look... wow." He reached for me, pulled me into a kiss that was deeper than usual. Intentional. There was a spark, a trace of the man I married. And I tried. I really did. I kissed him back, let my fingers rest on his chest, let the moment stretch toward something that maybe could fix what was broken. But halfway through, something shifted. My mouth was moving, but my mind was somewhere else. My body started to respond, then pulled away, like a reflex. "I'm sorry," I whispered, stepping back. He frowned. "Did I do something?" "No," I said quickly, reaching for my robe. "It's not you." It was me. It was completely me. I slept on the far edge of the bed that night, staring at the ceiling again, pretending not to feel the weight of his silence filling the room. The next morning, the man, left the house for a walk. Said he needed air. I nodded, grateful for the space. But just as I was pouring myself a second cup of coffee, the door opened. He came back. And he saw. Me. My robe hanging open just slightly. The lace strap of that same lingerie peeking through. My husband standing nearby, holding his keys. Nothing compromising. Not really. But the moment... God, it felt exposed. Like we'd been caught doing something wrong, even though we hadn't. Our eyes met. His gaze wasn't shocked. It was searching. He said nothing and walked past us like he hadn't noticed anything at all. But the tension in the room was suffocating. Hours passed. Everyone scattered. Quiet returned, but not peace. It was nearly midnight when I went to the kitchen. Couldn't sleep. I didn't turn on the lights, just stood there in the soft hum of the fridge, sipping water and pretending not to feel every nerve in my body still alert. He was already there, in the shadows, barefoot, hoodie half zipped, leaning against the counter like he'd been waiting. "I thought you went to bed," I said, voice barely audible. "I couldn't," he replied, then added after a pause, "You looked different earlier." I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to say anything. He stepped closer, but not too close. His voice dropped into a whisper. Do you love him? The question hit like ice water. I stared at the glass in my hand as if the answer might float to the surface. But nothing came. I didn't answer. Because I didn't know how. Or maybe I didn't want to hear myself lie. We didn't touch, not even once. But that space between us, it vanished, dissolved like sugar in hot tea, slowly, quietly, completely. His breath wasn't on me, but I felt it. His presence was loud without making a sound. We stood there like two people caught in a storm they didn't see coming, waiting for thunder but hoping it never arrives. And for the first time, I realized the worst part wasn't what might happen next. It was that I wanted it to. The house was quieter than usual. Not the usual kind of quiet, but the kind that almost hums, like something was waiting just around the corner. He was on the couch, legs curled under him, wearing a loose t-shirt and plaid pajama pants. There was a half-empty mug on the coffee table and the blue light from the TV flickering across his face. Some old movie played in the background, one of those feel-good ones, forgettable dialogue, cozy lighting. Fitting, I guess. I stood behind him for a moment, just watching. His hair was a little messy, falling across his forehead. Without even thinking, I stepped forward and brushed it gently aside. My fingers lingered. He looked up. There was a pause. A real one. Not awkward. Just full. And then he reached up, slowly, and took my hand. He didn't say anything. Didn't pull or press. Just held it like he was waiting to see if I'd let go. I didn't. I sat down beside him. Close. Too close. My shoulder barely touched his, and it felt like fire. My heartbeat wasn't in my chest anymore. It was everywhere. In my throat, my fingertips, the base of my spine. I turned toward him, and he mirrored me. No words. Just breathe. Just space collapsing. And then, he kissed me. Software. Unhurried. Like a promise or maybe a confession. His lips moved with care, like he didn't want to scare me. And God help me. I kissed him back. Not a mistake, not a flinch. A choice. That kiss was full of everything we hadn't dared say. All those glances, the silence, the restraint. It all broke right there, spilled out in a moment I'll never be able to erase, no matter how badly I want to. But then, I pulled away. Hard. I stood, shaky, voice caught in my throat. This can't happen, I whispered, not even sure who I was talking to, him or myself. He stayed still, just watching me. His eyes didn't beg. They understood, but also didn't agree. I went upstairs that night like I was fleeing a crime scene. Every step felt loud, every floorboard a confession. In the dark of the bedroom, I stared at the ceiling again. How many nights now? And replayed it over and over. The way he looked at me after. Like he didn't regret it. Like he thought I wouldn't either. And the truth? I didn't. Not in that moment. The next morning, everything felt tight. Like the house itself knew what had happened. I avoided the kitchen. He avoided eye contact. I turned on the TV, just to hear something normal, something safe. And that's when I saw it. On the screen. Black and white, slightly grainy, a still frame frozen like a slap across the face. Me and him. In the kitchen, late at night, from above. He was standing close. I was laughing, one hand on his arm. Harmless to a stranger, but I knew that moment. I remembered how it felt. My throat closed. My heart? Gone. Dropped straight to the floor. Who took this? And then it hit me. The new security system. The one my husband insisted on installing last month. For safety, he'd said. Just in case. Just in case. Was this the case he had in mind? I turned the TV off with a trembling hand and stared at the black screen. My reflection looked back. Blurred, pale, scared. What else had he seen? He left without a word. Early morning, Briefcase, keys, coat, like any other day. Except it wasn't. His silence wasn't quiet anymore. It was deliberate, calculated, as if the house itself had been put on notice. I watched from the window as his car pulled out of the driveway, and a wave of something icy washed over me. Panic? Maybe. Or maybe it was something worse. Certainty. The moment the engine disappeared down the street, I moved. Fast. Like some instinct had snapped inside me. I started in the hallway, checking under the mirror console. Then the guest room, the vents, the coat closet. Pulled down the smoke detector from the ceiling. Nothing. But that didn't calm me. It made me more frantic. What if there was more? What if he'd been watching longer than I thought? I even checked the dog's old treat jar. He hasn't touched it since we lost her last spring, but it still sat there. Empty. Or so I assumed. There wasn't a camera inside, but I still unscrewed the lid, just in case. I found nothing. No wires, no blinking lights, no obvious betrayal staring back at me. But still, I felt watched. The silence in the house wasn't innocent anymore. It was heavy, loaded, and I couldn't tell if it was mine or his. Later that afternoon, I sat on the edge of the couch, motionless, staring at the spot where it all happened. Where everything shifted. Where his lips met mine and nothing was ever the same. That's when he walked in. He didn't look at me right away. Just kicked off his shoes, tossed his keys, and sighed like he hadn't slept in days. Maybe he hadn't. Then, finally, his eyes found mine. "I know you're scared," he said. "So am I." I didn't answer. He moved closer, slowly, like approaching something fragile. "We don't have to stay here," he added. "We could leave, start over." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. And for a second, just a second, I imagined it. Another city, a rented apartment. No neighbors watching, no cameras, no rules. Just air, just space, just us. But then it hit me. That wasn't freedom. That was escape. And escape never holds. I looked at him and said the words I'd been avoiding since this started. This was a mistake. His breath caught. Only slightly, but I noticed. His jaw tightened. His shoulders dropped just a little. But he didn't get angry. He didn't argue. He stepped forward, carefully, one last inch, and lowered his forehead to mine. We stayed like that, still, silent, trembling, not touching anywhere else. Just that point between us, skin against skin. It wasn't intimacy. It was goodbye. I didn't cry. He didn't ask me to change my mind. We both just stood there, eyes closed, pretending we could freeze the moment and not feel the full weight of what came after. But the truth was there, pulsing between us. We couldn't go back. And we couldn't go forward either. So what's left when the line between guilt and longing is too blurry to trace? Just silence. The door opened at 6:42 p.m. No text, no call, no warning. Just the sound of keys and the click of polished shoes on hardwood. My hands, which had just reached for the wine glasses, froze midair. He was home. I turned, slow and careful. He looked exactly the same. Pressed shirt, coat still draped over one arm, not a single wrinkle out of place. But something about the way he closed the door behind him, it wasn't casual. It was final. He didn't say a word. Just walked into the kitchen like it was any other night. Opened the fridge, pulled out the leftover roast chicken, placed it on the counter. His movements were deliberate, controlled, quietly loud. Then he sat down at the dining table, folded his napkin, adjusted his silverware. I stood there, heart hammering, waiting for the inevitable. But still, he said nothing. I poured the wine with trembling hands, trying to keep them from shaking too much. Set his plate in front of him, took my seat across. He didn't look at me. Not until he reached under the table and placed something between us. A small black box, unmarked. I stared. Slowly, he flipped the lid open. Inside, a folded piece of lace, pale blue, the lingerie I'd worn just days ago, neatly placed, topped by a photo, one I hadn't seen before. Me in the kitchen, laughing, head tilted, his arm beside mine, his hand on the counter barely touching mine. Not scandalous, but intimate. Too intimate. You didn't even wonder, my husband said, voice low, steady. Not once, if I was watching. I couldn't breathe. He slid the box forward. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to spy. He added, "You left it all in plain sight." I wanted to speak, to explain, to apologize maybe, but the words caught in my throat like gravel. And then he did something I wasn't ready for. He stood, walked around the table, and leaned in, kissed me on the cheek. Software. Calculated. Final. Then he whispered, "Thank you. You've freed up the space." My blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" I asked, barely above a whisper. He didn't respond. Instead, he stepped back, straightened his cuffs, and turned toward the hallway. The sound of wheels. A suitcase? He pulled it in from outside, and behind him. She entered. Early 30s, maybe. Long coat, tight bun, phone still in her hand. His assistant. I'd seen her twice. Brief meetings, always polite. I'd never thought much of her. She gave me a tight smile. No malice, just precision. Behind her, another suitcase, and suddenly the room felt unfamiliar. Smaller, full of strangers. He looked at me once more. No gloating, no rage. Just distance. Like I was already gone. You ever realize you're being replaced before anyone actually says it? That was the moment. The chair beneath me felt cold, the wine sour in my mouth. I sat perfectly still as she walked past me, straight toward the guest room. Her heels didn't make a sound. And he? He stayed silent. There were no more questions left to ask. No answers that would matter. Only the echo of that kiss, and the box still sitting on the table, wide open, staring back at me like proof of my own unraveling. I don't remember falling asleep that night. Just the feeling of the bed being too cold on one side and too hot on the other. I laid there with my eyes wide open, even though the room was dark, even though the silence wrapped around me like a weighted blanket. The next morning, I woke up to movement. Not noise, movement. Boxes. A van in the driveway. Laughter from downstairs. His voice. Heron, I stayed upstairs. Frozen. I didn't pack. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I just watched. By noon, she had claimed the guest room, replaced the white curtains with some gray hotel-looking things, brought in new pillows. The coffee mugs in the kitchen were rearranged. My coat was no longer on the hook by the door. He never told me to leave. But he never asked me to stay. And God, that was worse. The boy? Gone. No note. No message. No, "I'm sorry." Just disappeared like he'd never been part of it. Maybe that was his way of making peace with what we both knew. We couldn't exist in the same story anymore. Or maybe he was just ashamed. I tried calling once, then twice. The third time went straight to voicemail. That was 2 weeks ago. Now the silence in the house isn't heavy. It's hollow. Echoes bounce off every corner. Every drawer I open feels like a drawer I don't own. I keep reaching for things that are no longer there. My moisturizer, my favorite mug, the old pair of fuzzy socks I always wore when it rained. Vanished. Like me. He changed the locks 3 days ago. Didn't say a word. Just handed me a new key and said, "This one works for the back entrance only." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because I suddenly understood. I wasn't part of the home anymore. I was visiting. And you know what's terrifying? He did it all with calm. No yelling, no accusations, just replacements, bit by bit. My name was removed from the mailbox. The bathroom cabinet now holds her makeup bag. My perfume is gone from the dresser. Even the dog's collar, still hanging by the garage, was placed into a box labeled Donate. He didn't throw me out. He erased me. Quietly. Efficiently. I wandered into the kitchen yesterday with grocery bags, instinctively, like I always had. I opened the fridge to put the milk away, and there it was. A note taped to the shelf. Please don't store your things here anymore. No signature, no handwriting, printed, cold. I stood there, blinking at it. Then I turned, walked out, and sat in the car with the engine running and the milk sweating through the paper bag on the passenger seat. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel panic. I felt blank. Because what do you do when your life is dismantled so cleanly there's nothing left to hold? You sit in silence, just like he wanted. I didn't mean to walk past the house. Honestly, I told myself I'd take a different route. Just a quick loop around the neighborhood, stretch my legs, breathe in some cold air, forget for 5 minutes what my life had become. But feet have memory, and mine knew exactly where to go. So I found myself there, across the street, sitting on the edge of the little stone bench under the tree, the one we planted when we first moved in. Back then, it was barely a stick with leaves. Now its branches stretch wide, like they're trying to protect something that no longer wants to be kept. I had a photo in my hands. United States, the three of us, a barbecue in the backyard. He had a beer in one hand, she was holding a tray of watermelon slices, and God, I looked happy. Fake happy? Number just unaware. I studied the faces. I tried to remember what I'd been thinking in that moment. What stupid grocery list or casual errand had felt important that day? What tiny, meaningless choice had been the beginning of the end? Inside the house, lights were on. A new curtain in the bedroom. Gray. Modern. Clean. Through the window, I saw her walk by with a wine glass. Barefoot. Confident. She paused in front of the mirror I once picked out and adjusted her hair with one hand. The other still held the glass. He came up behind her. They laughed at something. She leaned back into him and he kissed the side of her neck. Slow, familiar, practiced. And I realized something. She wasn't replacing me. She already had. I wasn't a ghost in that house. I was erased from it. Fully. Carefully. I thought that would break me. It didn't. I sat still, watching, not blinking. My hands gripped the photo too tightly. The corners started to bend. I didn't stop. A car drove by. A jogger passed with a dog. Life continued as if my little world hadn't exploded a few feet away. And maybe that's the part no one prepares you for. Not the betrayal. Not the silence. Not even the shame. But how normal everything else stays while you fall apart. I stayed on that bench until my fingers went numb. Eventually, I folded the photo, once, then again, and slid it into my coat pocket. I didn't cry. Not here, not for them. I stood slowly and looked at the house one last time. Not at the windows, not at the porch, but at the door. The one that used to open for me. The one I used to come home through. Now it belonged to someone else. And I walked away. No goodbye. No second glance. Just the sound of my own steps fading into the quiet and the faintest feeling that maybe, just maybe, that was the first real decision I'd made in a very, very long time.